Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to the Harpin On Rugby podcast. Joining me this week is someone back for cap number 19. Welcome back to Mr. Hugo Gordon.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be back.
It's good to be back. It's a pity it had to be this week, but sure, what can we say? But listen, we can't put it off any longer. Let's turn our attention to that feature match of the week, and here is a very generic 80-word summary of how things went. Leinster struck first through Tommy O'Brien, but Bordeaux replied ruthlessly as Luku, Uberti and Biobari carved open the defence among 5 converted tries in a devastating 35-7 first half. Leinster's line-out repeatedly malfunctioned, killing momentum and territory. McCarthy and Ringrose crossed after the break, yet Bordeaux's control, long kicking and Luku's penalties kept the gap insurmountable. Even with yellow cards to Luku and Boniface, Leinster's late pressure fell short as Bordeaux calmly secured a dominant second successful title. Now, usually I say at this stage, we're going to go into more detail than that. But Hugo, I think being Leinster fans, the finer details are probably the last thing we want to be focusing on right now. But to be fair, the general picture doesn't look any better. We're going to have to harp on that, I'm afraid. So listen, after a decent start, we just began letting them into our own 22, and it was kind of downhill from there.
Yeah. And look, firstly, we should say, obviously, Leinster fans going to be immensely disappointed today. But we just need to remember that no one's going to be feeling this more than the players and coaches. No one's going to be hurting more than them.
Absolutely.
Everyone's got a right to voice their opinions on this, and we've certainly got plenty to critique on this podcast today. But we just need to remember that amidst everything, the players and the coaches will be feeling this as intensely as anyone. With that said, this was a hugely disappointing performance. There's 5 final defeats in a row now, obviously. The previous 4 have been heartbreaking. In a couple of instances, I felt like we really blew it, frankly, but they were at least contests. They were all very close. Here we were blown away out of the gate. Bordeaux are an excellent, excellent team, and we're going to spend some time talking about them later on. But this Leinster squad is full of top quality internationals. 22 out of the 23 players are internationals, and they're good ones. This is, they're not just kind of a couple of caps here and there. These are world-class players in many cases. On paper, we should not be being beaten as easily as we were. And, in retrospect, the ominous signs early on, the game starting with Hugo Keenan knocking on with no one near him and maybe a bad sign of what was to come. But, to your point, it actually did start relatively well. With that nice patient Leinster attack early on, 19 phases, we needed to kind of wear them down, but we did eventually wear them down. Then we found some space out right. Tommy O'Brien goes over in the corner after 8 minutes. It was a good start. We'd weathered some early pressure. We'd gone up and scored our own, and, it was kind of the Leinster you'd want to see. But then it all goes wrong, and I'm not going to go through everything that happens on the timeline today. But I think it's worth us going through a few of the kind of key incidents as they happen, just because they all happen so close together, and it's this relentless barrage of things going wrong. So we don't deal with the line out off that first score. Bordeaux were able to set up in our 22. Wokey is actually thwarted in the corner by the TMO, kind of his hand down just before he gets a score in. But they're able to lay siege, and Luke is able to dive over after Henshaw overfalls in defence. Then Harry Byrne sends the kick off long, allows Bordeaux back into our half. A horrible bit of luck after Louis Bielre's kick goes dead after brushing Hugo Keenan's fingertip. Bordeaux tear us apart off the scrum, and this is far, far too easy. 3 passes takes out 14 of our 15 players, so nearly our entire defence. Ioane gets his timing entirely wrong. I don't know whether it's him or whether it's a systems failure, but he gets his entire timing of his kind of his charge up entirely wrong. Leaves Hugo Keenan badly exposed out wide, and Reassi actually very unselfishly, because he could probably get in himself, but he puts Uberti away in the corner. And it's 2 tries in 3 minutes, and we have basically not touched the ball in that time. And we've had very little possession since our try, and that pattern then just continues. We're struggling to get out of our own half. Our exits are pressured. We're not getting many opportunities. When we do, we're unable to get going in attack, and our line-out starts to disintegrate. And I'll come back to this one shortly, because I think it's a big part of what goes wrong. And then the key moment, I think the moment basically in retrospect at which we lose the match, is when we're camped on their line at 21-7. The game is still potentially, we can get it back at that stage. We're going through phase after phase, but they hold us out. Space starts to open up. Actually, at the moment we get turned over, there is space out right, and if we'd been able to get the ball away there, we'd probably go over, and then it's 21-12, maybe 21-14, and we're still in the game. as it is, huge psychological boost for Bordeaux, huge blow to Leinster, and then the nails in the coffin come shortly afterwards. The ball pinballs around midfield after a charge down kick. Pinot is the first one onto it, sends BLBRA through. And if that wasn't already that, we tried to play from our own half with the clock in the red. I understand why we've done this. We feel under pressure to get the score. We need to close that gap in the ahead of the second half. But it all goes wrong. A flat pass from Harry Byrne gets picked off by Mofana, who raced under the post to score. Real shades of the Edinburgh game with that pass. A too predictable pass, too flat. Mofana barely has to move on to it. And they're through. 35-7 at halftime, game over. And it was so disappointing to be blown away so early. This was always going to be a tough game, but I didn't think we'd be out of it at halftime. And though we improved in the second half, a lot more territory, a lot more possession, really we weren't able to do much with it. Joe McCarthy was able to score Lucy in the sin bin, but we weren't able to do anything more with that extra man advantage. Really, that was the tone for a lot of the second half. Plenty of time in the ball, not really making much of a dent in attack, only really rarely threatening their line. And by the time Ringrose scored a late consolation, it was too little too late. And despite Boniface getting yellow carded for a pretty ugly dog shot on James Ryan late on, I think our day was really rather summed up by the fact that we failed to find touch with the resulting penalty and then knocked on in the subsequent passage of play and weren't able to pick up any more points before the end. And let's face it, there's been warning signs of this happening all season. Obviously, we've been pretty unconvincing through large parts of this season. In this podcast, we've talked previously about how we wouldn't get away against Bordeaux, in particular with the performance we got away with against Edinburgh or Sale or Toulon. I was really hoping we'd see Leinster step up a gear with this one. This was the moment where, it was the time for it all to come together. The kind of time for it all to kind of show that the things we've been working on all season we kind of figured out. But if anything, really the opposite happened. I really thought the pack was an area where we'd have the edge in this game. Going into this game, I thought the way we'd win this was we'd look to dominate them up front. We'd look to limit their possession. We'd look to limit their time on the ball. That pack on paper was excellent, and I'd have taken it on over theirs on paper. But actually, kind of the opposite happened. Our pack was really just kind of bullied. The breakdown in particular was a nightmare. Bordeaux won 11 ruck turnovers to our 3, which really says it all. Our maul defence was pretty good. We turned over 3 of their 5. Our scrum broadly maintained parity, although that was definitely under pressure. But scrum's not something we build our game around. I think the idea was basically if our scrums are kind of holding their own, we'd maybe be okay. But in general, we just getting dominated up front. We were losing collisions. We weren't able to get anything going with our forward carries. Poor Caelan Doris, who I think broadly had a good game. He carried a lot in this game for basically no meters. By contrast, Bordeaux were able to get meters and momentum. Felt like any time they were carrying the ball, gave them clean rucks, gave them space to move into. And, we'll talk about Maxime Luciu in a little bit, but if you give him clean ruck ball and plenty of time, he's going to tear you to pieces. And then our line out, and I think this was a really, really disastrous time for our line out to go wrong. I had a look at the official stats. The official stats say we won 95% of our line outs in that game. I don't think that's true. It certainly didn't feel that way.
They weren't clean takes anyway,
no,
if anything.
No, absolutely not. And they went wrong at a few key moments, in particular in that first half. And it's really disappointing. Our lineup, we talked about this before, our lineup, which has been a bit of a disaster in previous seasons, has been really good this season. It's been really good all tournament. It's actually been one of the difference makers and one of the reasons why we've made it as far in this tournament as we have. When other things were going wrong, our lineup was actually incredibly effective. But this was the worst possible game for it to go wrong, and it meant we just had no platform to launch off. And combine that with our attack not really getting going elsewhere, then it was just it really blunted what we were able to do. We also completely lost the aerial battle. So Bordeaux kicked nearly twice as much as us for nearly twice as many meters. They retained nearly twice as many balls. And even the ones that we gathered, it always felt like we were under real pressure. We knocked on a couple early on, and we weren't able to kind of get away cleanly. I think there was kind of a moment in the first half where Louis BRA, who's one of the smallest guys on the pitch, was able to beat Tommy O'Brien, who is one of our best aerial players and broadly had a good day, but Louis BRA was able to beat him to a ball in midfield, and that just felt like it really summed things up. We really struggled with those 50-50 aerial contests, and just defensively in this game, not good enough. We've we've worried a little bit about our defense at times over the last couple of years, and we worried what a team like Bordeaux, who are very good at finding that edge, who are very good on transition ball, will be able to do. And all those kind of fears really came through. They just took us to pieces, and it felt like they took us to pieces far too easily. And look, it's hard to know really kind of what combination of factors has led to that, but Jacqueline Lambert was brought in to solidify our defense. It was the key reason he was brought in. And who knows what the exact kind of mix of things going wrong has been, but that clearly hasn't worked. Conceding 41 points in a Champions Cup final is a disaster any way you look at it. And there've been far too many games like that this season where we've given away a lot of scores and a lot of easy scores. So, I mean, in the end, really reminiscent, I thought, this game of the opening game against France on the opening round of the Six Nations. Very similar to the way they played out. Tactically outdone by a team that was better at kicking, that tore us apart on transition, that felt like, frankly, they were better suited to the way kind of rugby in 2026 is played. Out-muscled in the pack and ultimately blown away in the first half. And by the time we got a toehold in the second half, as we did against France as well, too little, too late. I'm sure the heat didn't help. It was around 30 degrees. It was incredibly humid. Irish teams have not historically done well in that, but that's life. And it's we need to face facts. This isn't the first time this season Leinster have looked off the pace. We can't blame the weather for all of those.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, I mean, you'd expect if that's your issue, then you'd want to be performing in the first 20 minutes at
Yeah,
the very
yeah.
least.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So it feels difficult to blame that one really. So a really bad day at the office. Kind of almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong. A few players who I thought had good games. I mentioned the Tommy O'Brien. I thought had an effective enough game. I thought Kieran Frawley, when he came on, did well. I thought Joe McCarthy was probably the best of our starters. And I thought Todd Furlong made a good impact off the bench, but a day to forget for a lot of other players around the pitch, a day to forget for the team. And unfortunately, yeah, another disappointing final day.
yeah, I think the key element there is just basically it was a case of the two teams on paper versus who showed up on the day, and like you said, it was reminiscent of that opening game on that Thursday night in the Six Nations. When, as we said in our preview show, what we were looking for was something closer to our third game in the Six Nations at Twickenham. It was a lot of the same players as well, and when you get individuals not performing. And another thing we said in the preview, and a lot of people were saying, was, oh, this is a battle of the irresistible force of the Bordeaux attack against the immovable object of our defense. But it turned out kind of the other way around. I mean, that first try we got, like you said, it was 19 phases before Tommy O'Brien got over, and even then, I think it was Bocheton, their number 6, was down injured. So it was basically we had an extra man in that series, and then we needed an extra man to get our second try as well. So it was our attack struggling against their defense, and they were kind of hitting us with the 2-man tackles. We were literally basically getting a taste of our own medicine from their defense. It's almost like they just copied us, and we're just better at it on the day. But it was the performance on the day that was the issue. And like you say, it was just we can look at other factors as well. There were other factors. We'll talk about them later, but principally it was two quality teams, but just one actually just showing up on the day ready to play. We got off to a decent start. We got the try, but following up from there, it's not so much about the individual things that went wrong, but even being able to react to them. And the way Bordeaux was able to just turn those opportunities into scores. It was just like two different teams. Elsewhere in the EPCR tournaments, Montpellier captured the 2026 Challenge Cup, also in Bilbao, with a commanding 59-26 win over Ulster. Despite an early Ulster lead through Nick Timoney, Montpellier's power and precision overwhelmed the young Irish side. Tries from Taoifi Fanua, Vunapola, Bekonye, Nushi, Erdothio, Unkpatan and Vincent sealed the victory. Can you tell I practiced that before we started? Ulster's spirited efforts, including scores from Izuchukwu, Balakoon and Lowry, reflected their resilience and progress under Richie Murphy, but overall, it has been a disappointing end to the season for the Ulstermen. But now we must return to the San Mam Stadium on Saturday afternoon, and for all our talk about what we got wrong, We do have to hand it to Bordeaux. They were exactly what we expected them to be, and they got the performances from exactly the players we expected to perform. They are indeed worthy back-to-back champions, Hugo.
Yeah, all credit to Bordeaux. They've been the best team in this tournament by miles. Ultimately, you look back at everyone else over the course of this tournament, and there's been one clear winner on paper the whole way through this. I thought they were sublime yesterday. For as disappointing as Leinster were, Bordeaux were everything you'd want from a team in a European final. They are so much fun to watch. They're so exhilarating. They combine brain and brawns and speed. They're just so perfectly adapted to a modern rugby setup that encourages kicking to contest and effective attack off transition. And they put on a clinic yesterday, and ultimately they put us to the sword. We've talked a bit about just kind of taking those chances when they come, and their ruthlessness is so important. Their ability to make something out of nothing. You give them a sniff, and all of a sudden they're down. They're down over the try line at the other end of the field. Apparently, the majority of their tries this season have come off under 3 phases or less. It tells you something about how quickly they can turn nothing into something. We got the full force of that yesterday, unfortunately, in that first half. And you mentioned defensively. We don't think of Bordeaux as being this defensive powerhouse, and certainly that hasn't been true in recent seasons. It's been one of the kind of the issues that's dogged them, even as they've improved over recent seasons, and even at times this season, they got a telling off from the defense coach after a pretty poor performance against Perpignan last weekend. But they had our number yesterday. We just struggled to deal with their line speed. They were just constantly stopping us on the gain line. You talked about those double tackles. And again, a bit of kind of reminiscent of that France game where poor Caelan Dorfs was getting hit by two tacklers every time he was on the ball. And they regularly caught us behind it. The kind of predictable attack maybe from Leinster, but certainly they were dealing with it incredibly well. And for those interceptions, I mean, we were picked off twice for what was essentially a 14-point swing. So firstly, Mofana scoring off of that first one, that flat pass from Harpin at the end of the first half. And then Tommy O'Brien getting picked off to stop what looked like a pretty certain Leinster try early on in the second half when Bordeaux were down a player. I actually can't remember now off the top of my head who it was that picked off O'Brien's pass. But they hold the space really well. They don't bite in too early, nor do they kind of leave too much space out wide, nor do they kind of leave it too late. Stepping at just the right time, kind of Tommy Brown's having to force the ball a little bit, but they step in just the right time. And though ultimately it doesn't lead to another score being conceded, it stops, Leinster being able to close the gap further. And who knows, maybe if we'd scored 2 tries during that yellow card period, it starts to put the doubts in Bordeaux's mind. But defensively, they were so solid. The fact that they only really gave away 7 points across those 2 sin bin periods, tells you that actually they managed us very well. And for much of the rest of the game, it didn't really look like they were having too much trouble with us at all. We had our chances in this game, particularly in the second half. But, we said that key moment at 21-7 when we were camped on their line and they were able to just kind of stop us there. And that was the difference. This team that is lethal in attack, but also rock solid in defense. And they were just a level above what we were able to bring to bear in this one. And a few players in particular to mention, Louis Bielbiere, he is just maybe the most lethal attacking player in world rugby at the moment. And he's still, 23? Is he? 22? He had just an astonishingly good game. This is from a guy who walked off the pitch in crutches last week. I wasn't even sure if he'd be playing in this game, but you wouldn't know that at all from this. He's involved in Bordeaux's first 4 tries in this game. He first carries hard in midfield to set up Lucy's early score. It's actually Bielbiere's carry that it kind of sets up that ruck where Lucy scores off of. His kick led to the scrum that set up their second. Feet of a ballerina to skip past 3 Leinster defenders for their third try. His footwork.
I didn't think even he could have scored.
No, when that pass comes in, because it's not a great pass. I think it might be from Jalabert, but I'm not sure who that pass comes in from. And it kind of bounces short of him, and he has to come off his wing to get it. And at that stage, I thought we had him, and he just leaves. He makes it look so easy.
Was that Clarkson and Gibson Park, but it could have been anybody.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's kind of that step. I don't think anyone's able to stop him from there. And then he beats someone else to the try line as well. And he actually beats another defender. I think it's Gibson Park again to finish off Pinot's break for their 4th. Mentioned also that kind of that high ball he takes from Tommy O'Brien. He's he might be a small player, but he's powerful, he's smart, and he was so busy and such an effective player. Jalibert, I thought, had a very, very good game at 10, really effective at pulling the strings. And I think, unfortunately, the difference between him and Harry Byrne on the day was really stark.
Yeah,
The difference of what a 10 who's really, playing at their best can mean to a team. Couple of players in their pack, I thought had good games as well. I thought Jefferson Poirot, who, aside from having one of the best names in rugby, I thought he was very busy around the park, gave Clarkson a tough time in the scrum, even if it didn't necessarily lead to penalties. I thought Cameron Wokey had an excellent, excellent game. He was an absolute menace around the park.
yeah. I hope he's okay. That would take a nasty
Yeah,
injury as well.
yeah. He went off with that painful looking injury in 50 minutes. Otherwise, he would have been a contender for player of the match. He took our line out to pieces.
Mhm.
Bordeaux looked a lot less effective without him on the pitch, I thought. Big Ben Tamafuna as well, doing some real damage off the bench. He's been an extraordinary player for Bordeaux this season, but deserved player of the match, Maxime Lucu. An astonishing performance from him. Even with that fairly brainless yellow card for the hair pull on Joe McCarthy, for all the commentators talk about that one being unlucky, I thought it was a pretty straightforward yellow card. But
Definitely.
I thought he was otherwise pretty much faultless. His kicking in this game in particular
Yeah.
was outrageous. It felt like every box kick was laser guided. The distance and accuracy he was getting on them, they'd pick up the ball deep in their 22. We were kicking to him pretty consistently in the first half and kicking long, and still somehow he'd reliably find touch in our half from there. It was pretty extraordinary. And then faultless off the tee, including a couple of really tricky conversions from out wide. He was responsible for 21 of Bordeaux's points. And on present form, you'd have to say he's pushing Antoine Dupont for the status of best nine in the world. Just an extraordinary performance from him, an extraordinary performance from Bordeaux. They showed us where we are not at the moment. They showed us the standards that rugby is currently being set at the moment, and it's up to us to figure out a way how we close that gap.
Absolutely. I mean, there's not much more I can add to that. It was a consummate display. It was they played the levels 1 to 15 on the pitch where we expected to be, where we knew we needed to be, and we were just short, and we were punished. And there can be no argument about that. Okay, so it's just a couple of things I want to go over before we finish, and it's like I just want to be clear. We've talked about how poor Leinster were. We've talked about how amazing Bordeaux were. I've got these couple of headings here: officials' decisions and bounce of the ball. And so we're covering this now at this late stage in the podcast because we don't think it totally determined the game. But I still like mentioning actually what happened in the game, and so I've just got a list of officials' decisions here, just various little comments about them that aren't, it's not blaming the referee for a result or anything like that. It's my point is that two things can be true. A team can be outplayed, and there can be some decisions that we were wondering about. Now, the first thing is just a small point. That now that tip of Hugo's finger, it did hit his finger. It definitely did. But my question is what made the TMO look at it? Was it that Beal Barry was saying it? Because if that's the reason, if you're looking at it because a player is saying it, then surely all the players can do that and get such, because it was a forensic look. It took them about 7 or 8 looks to find it. They did find it. It did happen. It was the right call. But I was just wondering about that. How the TMO check was initiated. There was a Van der Vliet turnover where the ball was played out of his hand by the gut player on the ground, and then Harry Byrne knocked it on, and he just gave the knock on. I thought that that could have been worth a review in itself. There was a tackle. I think it was Moafana tackle. It was a big hit on Robbie Henshaw. Everyone was like, "Oh, it was a big hit," but I thought maybe he was on his knees when he made the hit already. Maybe that was worth a look. Doesn't mean it would have been a penalty, but again, worth a look. That Wokey knock on, like you said, if we could have scored more tries in that period with the extra man, there was a moment after a line out where it went to Wokey and he put his hand out and he knocked it on, and again, I'm just saying maybe it was just worth a look by the referee. They say, oh, the TMO's cleared it, but maybe they could have had a few more looks at that. The tucked arm from Poirot, it was literally, they took him off just after this happened, by the way, that tucked arm. And his name is Poirot. And it was a bit of a mystery why it wasn't looked at. And then we had a tackle beyond the horizontal. Now, this game was well over at this stage. But there was a tackle towards the end that I thought might have been worth a look. Also, that Luku thing, did he grab his hair or did he grab him by the back of the collar? I mean, neither of them is good. The referee seemed to say, "Oh well, if he'd gotten his jersey, would have been okay, but he got his hair, so I'm going to yellow card him." But if he got him by the back of his collar and pulled him back by his neck, that's not good either. But listen, these are all minor little things. I don't think they affected the result. What do you think of all of that?
Yeah, I think I agree, and unfortunately, this is it's one of those ones where I think a few of these could have gone our way. I think in particular the Cameron Wokey knock on. I was astonished that wasn't given as a yellow card, and I thought Poirot was pretty lucky for his dangerous clear out on a furlong as well. And had those been given, Bordeaux's discipline was actually probably one of their few weaknesses in this game. Not so much a number of penalties given away, but they're close enough to getting 4 yellow cards during this game rather than just the team that they got. And had the ones on Wokey and the ones on Poirot been given, had those been given, Bordeaux would have been briefly down to 13 or even 12 players, and maybe that gives us an opening. But look, as you said it for yourself, we can't really blame the referee for this one. It would have been us, looking for a refereeing miracle to get us back in there. I've got my views on those decisions, but I think at that stage, game was long gone.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and like I say, I don't think it affected. Maybe it might have affected the margin,
Yeah.
but definitely wouldn't have affected the result. But I can guarantee, literally, no other podcast is going to mention those decisions for this week. So we might as well do it. That's my reason for that. The final thing is we're talking about the bounce of the ball. I mean that the tip off Hugo's finger is the difference. I mean, in a game where you're playing a team that you're trying to keep out of your own 22 for love or money, the difference between a fucking scrum in their half and a scrum for you in their half and a scrum for them 5 meters from the line. I mean, you just can't. You can't legislate from that. And then, of course, you get the second Barry try that begins with a Jalabert kick, rare mistake for him, a kick that's just totally blocked, ricochets around, and just ends up with Penno. And before you know it, boom, boom. And this is just a personal opinion for me. I said this in our WhatsApp group earlier on. This is just my own thing. There's a few not just rugby but sporting phrases that just grind my gears, I suppose is the phrase. And one of them is making your own luck. I do not believe anyone in sport makes their own luck. Luck is arbitrary. Luck happens to you. What the great teams do is make the most out of luck. And I think that's the difference. And I think that's the expression. And you saw what happened. Pennu, in a moment's notice, the ball fell to him. Boom. There's Bealberry with him. Boom. Under the post. That's what the greats do. When the little bounce of the ball goes their way, they know exactly what to do and to be able to respond. And I think that was one of the other big differences on the day. I mean, if we were looking through Bordeaux goggles, or well, pretty much everyone in the whole rugby world was probably hoping Leinster were going to lose this one. So everyone, they might say, well, Leinster got lucky here, Leinster got lucky there, and we weren't able to take advantage of it, and that was the difference. But listen, it's just a frustrating day for all Leinster fans. We want to put it behind us as soon as possible. But listen, that's the way it goes. And I think someone said in the group as well, we're not entitled to that 5th star. We have to go out and earn it. The top. I mean, you look where the last time we were in Bilbao, we got the 4th star. We beat a top 14 team in the final, just with a penalty, and then they missed one. But the top 14 has moved from strength to strength, and those teams have gotten stronger and stronger, and that's where the bar is. We're still getting to finals, but I mean, that's not the standards we're set. We need to get over that hump. So we need to find a way to just get past that final hurdle. And we just have to keep plugging away at it. I mean, how do you see us going about that?
Yeah. So, you said yourself, the standards have been set by teams that have just pulled away from us at the moment. And while I think it's important to have some perspective around the fact that, on one level, Leinster being in so many finals in recent years is a sign of our quality. The fact that we haven't been able to get over the line in any of them is obviously a source of massive frustration. Um, we need to have a think about what it is that's holding us back from not just that fifth star, but frankly, maybe a bit of a kind of a sense that we've dropped off the level of where we have been in general over the last couple of years. The talent is there. You know, we just need to think about how we are maximizing that. We need to keep cool heads. Kind of these monkeys on your back can get heavier and heavier the longer it goes without, being able to get it over the line. This is going to be a psychological problem to solve as much as it is a kind of a rugby one. Um, but I think the quality's there. I think, the fact that we've been so close so often shows that we're not far away. We just need to think about the structures and the strategies we've got in place and think about how we go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like those old style video games where you go through all the levels and you beat all the little henchmen and you get past all the things, but then the big boss is always at the end, and you got to get past that. And we just haven't been able to manage that since 2018. Maybe we can find some kind of cheat code or something going forward. But listen, that's just something we have to work on, and I'm sure plenty of people have their opinions on that. And speaking of opinions, normally at this stage of the podcast, we have a look at some of the comments from our Facebook page, but just for this week, I chose to stay off all social media commentary for a day or two after the final for the sake of my own mental health more than anything else. Often it's a good idea to do that after a disappointing result. And in my defense, it's the first time I've done that. It's probably the last two, but the comments are all there on the Harpin Facebook page. You want to check it out. And if you want to get involved in the conversation yourself, head on over at the Full-Time Whistle after Leinster Ireland matches and feel free to leave your thoughts. Okay, listen, that's enough about that. We're going to leave it there for now. Many thanks to you, Go, for joining us. Looking forward to having you back on again soon.
Yeah, hopefully for a happier day next time.
Please, God. And as ever, be sure to stay tuned to Harpin On Rugby on all the socials during the week, starting with our bonus chat posting on YouTube Tuesday, where we'll be harping on how Leinster can recover for the URC playoffs. And then our 80-plus column, where we try to look at the wider rugby world, and that posts every Wednesday over on Substack. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.